Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce William Meader. And William Meader, if you didn't know, is an international troubadour singing the ageless wisdom songs all over the world. He has set a most rigorous schedule for himself, and for the last 14 years, he has been making the rounds twice a year between Australia and New Zealand, Canada, the US, and Europe. And in Europe, besides spending 4 weeks in England, he also travels to Germany, Ireland, and Denmark. For the last 6 years, I've been working with William's program in the UK, and we have been extraordinarily fortunate to be able to partner with a nonprofit educational organization called the Rican Trust. The Rican Trust is a spiritual education nonprofit, and it only works with spiritual and esoteric adult education. And it now has a network of 29 spiritual community centers spread throughout the country. The Ricans' mandate is one of grassroots spirituality, bringing high-quality spiritual and esoteric education to the various regions of England. And you can imagine in 2006, when that mandate came out from a conference held at the Quaker Meeting House, 400 people in London, England, and the mandate came from the board and the members to the Rican Trust. Don't hold any more big conferences. Use your money and your education to inspire high-quality spiritual education in the regions. So fortunately, William and I were in England at that time. And William was, and continues to be, the perfect person for the job, spreading spiritual education to the regions. Under the auspices of the Rican Trust, and with their support, William has given public lectures and workshops, read astrological charts in Manchester, London, Oxford, Wales, the Lake District, and many other UK locations. William has a strong following in England, and one of his great skills is his ability to put the essential truths of the esoteric tradition into a language that can be understood and appreciated by newcomers to the work. And I just want to take this one moment to let you know, if anybody is in Scotland at Easter next year, Scotland, England, or Europe, William has been invited to the Findhorn Foundation, the Easter Gathering, and 2012 is the 50th anniversary of Findhorn. And the topic for the workshop, and he's one of the main keynote speakers and contributors, the topic is Into Christ Consciousness, Co-Creating Our Emerging Future. So welcome, William.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you. Okay, hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Well, yes, it's good to be here again, and I want to share with you a variety of ideas. And although it's definitely a fourth ray conference this year, I'm going to be weaving some seventh ray things into it. And the reason I say that is because, as you've been hearing, the fourth ray is certainly the ray that is the governing ray for humanity in many ways. But we are also told that this is a cycle of humanity that is moving into a great seventh ray age, which correlates to the sign of Aquarius as well. So I want to weave some things together between these two rays. And I'd like to also state this, that in my view, the world is at a turning point. It's at a major turning point. And it's a turning point that has enormous implications for the remainder of the human species in a way. And it's a turning point that is leading to a great initiatory opportunity for humanity, one that has never been achieved before, one that we're only, you might say individuals have achieved this initiatory capacity, but all of humanity, that's another story. And we are in what I would call the burning ground experiences, which the Tibetan also calls it that, the burning ground experience. And what's so interesting about the burning ground period, which is always a prelude to an initiatory opportunity, is that it's as if we're walking on hot coals, and all you have to do is watch the world news to see what the hot coals are all about. We're finding crisis and difficulty in all social systems. We're finding that the worst of religion has manifested itself over the last few years, the worst of leadership, the worst of nations. And all of this is really indicative of the shadow of those social institutions or those categories of life rising to the surface in defiance against a much greater light that's trying to penetrate into the human condition, the light of the Christ consciousness, the soul of humanity. And what's so interesting about this burning ground period is that I think we're, as I was just telling Michael Robbins, I think we're in the burning ground phase, but I don't think we've reached the hottest part of the coals yet. Okay? And what's happening, in my view, is that as we approach this crisis intensity, we're seeing two things happen. We're seeing people like yourselves who sense a higher potential. We sense the new vision, a new way of living, a new culture, a new civilization, and we understand the fundamental principles that represent the guiding paradigms for that new civilization. But at the same time, there's the masses of people who are not yet awoken to their own causal body, their own soul, and they don't sense that vision. They don't sense that on the other side of the burning ground, on these hot coals, on the other side is dew-laden grass. Cool, dew-laden grass. They don't sense that grass at all. All they know is their feet are getting really hot. And they remember that back there it wasn't hot. And so there's a huge growing number of people that are turning in retreat. And so while there's a wave of movement in retreat, there's the visionaries who are trying to stay forward moving because they sense the dew-laden grass. And that polarity between the higher possibility and retreat to the past is the root from which much of the conflict and the crisis that we feel is happening. So I bring that to your attention because, in a certain sense, now's your day. This is your time. This is the time to be the bridge. This is the time to be able to bring the best of you forward, the best of you in terms of your wisdom, the best of you in terms of your understanding of life and your love, and be an agent that supports the transition of the past into the future. The title of my talk, I noted, is Synthesis and the Midway Point. What I want you to realize is that as we look at the larger picture first, we see that humanity is approaching this great crisis. And in many ways, we're told that we are in the process of the externalization of the hierarchy of masters, and that the reappearance of the Christ is something that's also tied into this movement we are making. But when we look at that whole thing from a chakra perspective, humanity is said to be the throat chakra for the whole planetary logos, which is amazing in its own right. Imagine that the entire sum total of human consciousness is this vibration to that entity. But that the heart chakra, that's the hierarchy, that's the masters, that heart chakra is wanting to infuse itself into that throat chakra. It's about the second aspect trying to fuse itself with the third aspect. And you and I, we're the vanguards of that. You know, we're said to be in what is called the era of the forerunner, which is said by the Tibetan to last from 1945 to 2025, with an acceleration after the year 1975. And that the new group of world servers are really the forerunners. And if you want to know who they are, all I can say is, ta-da, ta-da, it's us, it's us. So much of what's going on is this challenge about bringing love and wisdom, which is hierarchical love and wisdom, and infusing it into the intelligent activity of humanity, with all of the challenges that implies. But to really be a servant on behalf of that, and that's what we want to be. We want to be a servant on behalf of this fusion between the two and the three. To really be a servant of that, we have to be able to do it within ourselves. We have to be able to fuse those two energies within ourselves. We have to be able to take that profound sense of Christ-like love that wells up at moments within our heart, and we want to be able to infuse that into the intelligent mind nature of our lives. And to the extent that we can do that, we can be an effective servant to that larger drama. And what's so interesting about it is it's to synthesize love and intelligence is the prerequisite to getting to the Buddhic plane, to be inspired by the Buddhic plane. We've been talking a lot about the fourth ray and the Buddhic plane, which is ruled by the fourth ray. Keep in mind, the Buddhic plane is the abode of the ashrams. It is the plane of pure peace. There is no dissonance allowed in the Buddhic plane. But how do you get there? How do you touch it? How does it inspire you? You get there by fusing or synthesizing various dualities within yourself. And the big duality to synthesize these days is love and intelligence, or the fusion of your heart chakra and your throat chakra. But it's other fusions too. The blending of the masculine and feminine, for instance, is another one. Will and love is another one. But there's this idea that synthesis is the gate to the Buddhic plane. And it's the Buddhic plane where the ashrams are found, where the inspiration is rooted. And so one of the things I want to share with you today is this notion that I want to get right down to the chakra level and really just talk about the mechanism, because that's what this is about. How do we develop our mechanism to be more receptive to the downflow from the Buddhic plane? Because it's that downflow that provides you the ideation, the insight necessary to be that effective servant on behalf of humanity's upliftment. To begin, let me just say that the heart chakra itself, all of you know about that. All of you know when that heart is alive. All of you know those moments when the Christ just bursts forth from the heart. And you know that when that happens, the Christ, at that moment, has a new place to reach through. That quality of love, that quality of Christ is prerequisite number one. But then there's the whole idea of building our higher mind and engaging the throat chakra to be its companion. Much of this philosophy, you know, is so abstract, and it challenges us to think. It challenges us to build our higher mind. Sometimes people get frightened of this philosophy because they say it's just too heady, it's just too mental. But that's, you know, we're going into an age where it's all about building the higher mind. And the more we can build the higher mind, the more we can liberate and activate this chakra in ourselves. The chakra of divine ideation, the gate to the soul's creative ideas, and from another perspective, another gate for the ashram to express through. So we want to, much of the work of studying this material is really based upon the idea of awakening this center. And it presupposes that most of us here would have the heart chakra already developed. And then there's the challenge of fusing the two. And you know, there's methods that you can use. There's wonderful meditations that I've worked with, actually, where you open yourself up and you really awaken the Christ in the heart deliberately. Because that's what we want to do. We want to be able to use our chakras deliberately, rather than having them awaken when they do and not awaken when they're not. So the goal is to become master of your instrumentation, That's what masters are. I mean, sometimes we hear the word master and we think, oh, a master is somebody who you bow in reverence to and devote to. But that's not what it means. It means someone who has mastered his or her instrumentation. And each of us is a master in the making. Can we invoke the heart deliberately? Can we open it at will? Can we enliven this? Can we vivify this? And so working on meditations that, number one, open this, and not just focusing on the tingling feeling that happens. You know about the tingling feeling? Most people do. The tingling feeling is a pointer. It means something's happening. But more important than attending to the tingling feeling, what's important is to sense psychologically the qualitative effects that arise from that tingling feeling or simultaneous to it. What is the quality of higher love that is starting to be genuinely felt deep inside? And how does it feel in terms of the insight of the mind and the motions of the mind when this chakra is becoming enlivened? Qualitatively. And then what we want to do is we want to figure out, once we get a sense that we can feel what the quality of love is and the quality of active intelligence is, then we want to see if we can blend the two together, literally, within your etheric system. It's almost like creating a chakra between the two. Sometimes they call it the Heart Chakra, but a blending. And see if you can feel what it means. What does it mean to feel not love, not intelligence, but intelligent love? What does intelligent love feel like? Because that's the key. We have another name for intelligent love. It's another name for wisdom. Wisdom is love expressed as intelligence and understanding. But then it gets into another very interesting thing that I want to really move into and discuss with you, and that is something that the Tibetan talks about. He talks about something called the heart within the head. The heart within the head. Sometimes he refers to the light within the head. Other people call it by other names. Lucille Cederkrantz talks about it as the cave within the head. But really, that notion that inside the brain cavity is a special place is really crucial to understand in terms of your path and your effectiveness in the world. There is a region in the center of the head, in etheric substance. So it's very important to always think etherically and not dense physically as I talk about this. But in the region of the pineal gland and the ventricles, there is slowly in each of us a construct that's being built. In the ultimate sense, it becomes a portal. And it becomes a place where a higher kind of loving intelligence is realized. In other words, the heart within the head is a place where there's a fusion of these two energies and will. And that place has to be found. That place has to be found. And we find it in meditation. When you close your eyes and you meditate, you often You know when it is. You know when you feel like you're suddenly centered and on the beam. In a way, when you feel that you're centered and on the beam, you are in the neighborhood, let us say, of this sacred spot deep within the head. And yet the goal is to be able to be there even when you're not meditating. The goal is to be standing in the cave, so to speak, to stand in the cave. Because the cave, or the heart within the head, in a certain sense, the Tibetan calls it, he says, it's the place of peace within the head. And it's the place where you become what the masters call a lighted lamp. And that's what this is really all about. You see, the masters are very, very attentive to whether you have lit the lamp. And the lamp is inside you. And the work you do inside you to develop that lamp is like developing the filaments of the light bulb, you might say. To be a lighted lamp is to catch the master's eye. To be a lighted lamp is to be able to become receptive to the downflow from above. You see, it's the place of peace. And we're talking about the fourth ray, and the fourth ray is the ray of peace. And on the Buddhic plane, it's all about peace. So what I'm saying to you is this cave within the head, when it's fully developed, and I say that importantly because it's something that doesn't exist naturally, you have to develop it. But when it's fully developed, it gives you immediate access to the Buddhic plane. It becomes a center deep inside you that is invocative of the downflow of that substance of the Buddhic plane. And so it's incredibly important that we think about developing that, to develop that. You know, it is a center inside us that, for instance, this whole thing about the light within the head is actually where the whole notion of the halo came from in Christian thinking, the radiance around the head. It's very indicative of what the Christ meant when he said, let your light shine. To let your light shine. It's the inner light. And it's just a developmental thing that happens. But then when you have that alignment, to find it, the first thing you have to do is to realize that to really find it, you must pull a sense of yourself back. Even now, if you were to try this, you just try, as you listen to me, try to pull a part of yourself back. I often describe it with my students as this. Imagine that I'm going to put my hands here and that this is my face. That's right here. And I'm going to back away from my face. It's a place deep inside, behind your face. It's the intersection point between the vertical crown and the ajna. And that place is when you pull back. For disciples like us, we pull back, and if you do that right now, try it as I'm talking here. Try to see if you can keep your attention on what I'm saying. See if you can do it with open eyes. Pull back, and what often happens is as you find yourself centering back, you will find that what you're looking at out here gets a little fuzzy, either visually or it might get fuzzy in terms of just attending to every word I'm saying. Because we're, in a certain sense, the paradox of this process is as you pull yourself back, you, the perceiver, you, the thinker, are now attending in another direction, less outward and more inward. And that's very much related to the path of discipleship. But the goal is actually to learn how to be able to be back there and still fully engaged out here. To be in two places at one time. That's what initiate consciousness is about. To be in two places at one time. To be able to be in a subtle sphere and be in dense activity at the same time. To be in a place where you feel boundless and yet in another part of you is very much attending to locality. Is to be both in a place of universality and particularity. And that's what initiate consciousness has a lot to do with. And that's what we're all trying to get to. But the process is that for us, there's a tendency to pull back and then lose that outer extension. And then when you attend back to the outer extension, you lose the vertical. And so it's sort of a dance, And that's the key, is to slowly realize that even though that might be frustrating sometimes, the truth is that you're still building a muscle. You're building a muscle in consciousness. And it's a muscle that someday will really come to its full fruition, which makes it possible to be in those two places at one time. Because you see, when you can pull yourself back and be fully out there and engaged, vertically aligned, horizontally attentive. By the way, this is one of the gestures of the magician. Then you become a profound transforming agent from between that which is above and that which needs to be done below. The hierarchy knows what has to be done. The masters know what has to be done. The ashrams know what needs to be done. And you, as a disciple, are an outpost for an ashram, okay, and an inner group. And that ashram is conveying its intention through you, trying to, through your causal body first, and then into your mechanism. And the key is to get the mechanism so that it can do its part and rightly interpret, rightly sense, rightly discern, and express. You know, in one of the rules of magic, we have this notion that where land and water and air meet, there is the place for magic to be wrought. Well, guess where land, water, and air meet? Right in the center, right in the center, right in the etheric cave. You know, it's so interesting because, as some of you know, I teach this philosophy for many years around the world, and we often use the constitution of man as a symbol, or as a sort of a roadmap, you might say, to understand the journey. And we see that constitution with 7 planes, and we see it in a vertical sense. And up is more enlightened than down, and that sort of thing. But the truth is that that's just an illusion, in a way, because all of those planes of consciousness they're not up and down, they're in. They're in. In a certain sense, in and up are synonymous terms. You get what I'm saying on that? In and up are synonymous terms. In sense of dimensionality is the key. So when we say up, we want to go up to the soul, we want to go up to the ashram. What we're really saying is we want to go into the soul, into the ashram. We want to go into ever, ever, ever deeper spheres of subtlety. And the gate is the cave, is the heart within the head. And it's so appropriate that that would be the case. It's so appropriate that that lighted lamp would be the place that takes you in. Think about it from this perspective. The etheric plane within you is where all this is happening. The etheric body is where it's happening. But that's just the lower correspondence to the higher etheric, which is where the ashrams are found, as above, so below. We're trying to get a light within us established in the field of our mechanism that by analogy is equivalent to the field on a higher level where the masters are found and where the ashrams are seeking to inspire, as above, so below. So it's so indicative, so right to find this cave, to find this cave. And it's so interesting too, because let's talk about the Buddhic plane a little bit further. You know, the Buddhic plane it's so interesting because there's so many names to the Buddhic plane, and each name is telling in a way. You know, it's been called the plane of Christ. The plane of Christ, so immediately we think love. We think love, plane of Christ. But then it's also called the plane of pure reason. Pure reason. When we use the word reason, there's something about intelligence that is activated. So at the Buddhic plane we have a fusion. There's a fusion of intelligence and love. And a complete fusion. In a certain sense, they're no different at the level of the Buddhic plane. We need to create a structure below that is the miniature of that above. And that's what this heart within the head is all about. You know, it's a 12-petal lotus too. That's another interesting thing. You know, your heart chakra here is 12-petaled, but the heart within the head, which is a superior heart to this heart, the heart within the head is also a 12-petal lotus. And the causal body is a 12-petal lotus. And of course the zodiac, in a certain sense, is a big 12-petaled structure. 12, 12, 12, 12. It's through the numerology of it that we see how the flow manifests, So this light within the head is what I suggest we all really kind of think about as we meditate. One of the ways that I find very useful meditatively is to do this. When I meditate, I really first begin, well, going through the usual things. You start with breathing and establish rhythmic breathing. But when you get to the heart, you really try to allow it to open and really invite it to open. And always to open this thing, always to open the heart, there's always the feeling of surrender. You always have to surrender to or yield to Christ. You yield to love. There's always a letting go. And when there's a part of you that lets go, you can just feel this open up. And then you align with this and imagine that divine ideation is coming forth from the causal body to give active vivification to this chakra. And then you fuse the two, imaginatively and, most importantly, qualitatively. And then very slowly, very deliberately, try to lift it. Lift it, lift it, lift it, right into the center of the head. Right into the cave. And then try to be very, very still, right there. Very, very still. And see if you can hold that alignment. See if you can hold that alignment. And then, of course, there's another structure that I often use to help me in this process, and maybe it will help you. I actually see three things. I see the cave, and I'm going to go vertical now, even though, keep in mind, it really isn't vertical, but I'm going to use verticality as a teaching tool. There's something the Tibetan uses, I think, only once in his teaching. He calls it the apex of the mind. The apex of the mind. Find the apex of the mind. Once you've established that centered point, then sense your mental field and find the highest, subtlest point in that mental field. And then hold that point. And in many ways, what Michael mentioned earlier in his talk this morning, the key to doing all of that is to understand the nature of the point of tension. In a sense, the apex is the point of tension. There's a lower point of tension and a higher point of tension. The higher point of tension is the apex of the mind. The lower point of tension is the cave itself. Stay steady in that, holding that duality, that high point within you and that low receptacle within you. Hold steady to that. And that is what triggers the capacity for what the Tibetan calls the funnel. He actually uses the term, the funnel, as if when you structure your inner system just right, there's a funneling that comes into you, and it becomes the emerging thought form that is then used to move forward in service. It's a great seventh ray, in a way, the whole structure, the whole patterning of it is seventh ray. It's very meticulous. Understand the structure of consciousness, but we're invoking a fourth ray quality into us in this process. So I just wanted to share with you that whole structure today and that idea of how that works, because it really is pivotal. The more you can hold the point of tension in these two places, the more successful you will be in this downflow. You know, the point of tension has been defined as the focused, immovable will. The focused, immovable will. Sometimes when we meditate, we think that the idea is to just go into the void. We just want to just that, oh, isn't it nice? But actually, that's only half the equation. You need the will. You need the father principle, not just the mother principle in the system. You need the father principle to be held as well. It's the paradox of holding a sense of expansiveness while at the same time holding an unbending verticality at the same time, which seems at first glance to be contradictory, because these two energies of verticality and expansive love, when you hold those two together, they seem to negate each other. But that's part of the process of learning how, slowly, ever so slowly, to do two things at one time, to hold will and love at the same time. Intelligent love and will at the same time. So in conclusion, I would just want to share with you the idea that because we are at such a pivotal point in history, I mean, we couldn't have chosen a better time to incarnate than now, as difficult as it is. This is your day. This is your hour. This is your moment. The more skilled we can be at being a receptor, a transmitter of that which is above to transform that which is below, the more we are in service to the greater life. So I invite you all to be lighted lamps. Thank you very much.